Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Sophie again, in case you haven't listened to any of my videos. Today I'm going to talk to you about how we as humans are similar to sharks and what kind of differences we have. So then, are sharks fish or mammals? So sharks do have a vertebrae, which mammals have. So the definition of mammal is humans and all other animals that are warm-blooded vertebrates, which means you have a backbone. So we have a backbone. It's that spine, right? And we also mammals are usually characterized as having hair and mammillary ducts to feed their offspring. Well, sharks do have a type of vertebrate, but they are actually cold-blooded animals, which is different. So that's why they're characterized as fish. Now, sharks fall into a class called Chondrichthyes. Now, I might not be pronouncing that correctly, but they actually belong in the same class as the animals like rays. So there's a stingray in this slide right here, and also like manta rays and all those kind of animals, and chimeras or the ghost shark, which is that top shark pictured here. That looks a kind of ghostly, right? Those sharks are actually found really deep in our oceans. Well, they aren't sharks specifically, but chimeras. They're found really deep in our oceans, which is really interesting. All right, so let's go through some of the key features that make up a shark. So we talked that they kind of have a vertebrae, but it's actually not made out of bone like ours is. They have soft skeletons made out of cartilage. Now, have any of you ever heard of the word cartilage before? Do we have cartilage in our bodies? We do. We have cartilage in our noses and our ears. So feel how soft and flexible your ear and your nose is, like the tip of your nose. Well, that's like a shark skeleton. It's softer than your normal bone. And then sharks also have about 5 to 7 gill slits on either side. So that varies depending on the type of shark. So why do sharks have gills? That's right, that's how they breathe. So we breathe with our lungs, right? We breathe in air and then our lungs take the oxygen out of that air to bring to our body so our body can use that oxygen. Well, sharks need oxygen too, but they take water and pull it over their gills and extract the oxygen from the water. But some sharks, now this is interesting, some sharks have to swim all the time. They can never stop swimming or they will suffocate because they won't have that water flow over their gills. But then other sharks are able to sit on the floor of the ocean and gulp in water to pull the water over their gills so that they can breathe that way. So depending on the type of shark, that sometimes they have to swim their entire life. So what does that mean? That means sometimes they're like sleeping and swimming. Yeah. So one shark that has to do this is hammerheads. So they actually sometimes are seen swimming in one direction over and over and over again. And that's because sometimes they turn off one side of their brain so it can rest and they keep swimming in one direction. And then you'll see that they're still swimming in another direction because now they switched and they turned off the other side of their brain. Now, sharks also have a key feature of fins for swimming. So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about these fins. And they also have teeth that regrow. So we have teeth that regrow, right? So we lose our teeth when we're little and then we grow in adult teeth, right? Because we eat different things from when we're little to becoming an adult. Well, sharks are similar. They grow teeth and lose teeth as they age, and sometimes that teeth shape changes a little bit. So we'll talk about that in a couple slides as well. So shark fins, right? So there's 3 types of shark fins. There's the caudal fin. So this is the fin on the tail. So in this picture, you can kind of see it's blurred out in the back, that tail fin. Well, what do you think that tail fin does? That tail fin is what they use to actually swim. So it's what pushes them forward and helps them move forward in the water. Now, the fins on either side, the ones sticking out straight out of its body, which you see are the really big ones in this picture, are called pectoral fins. And these fins they used for lift and steering. So it's what helps the shark move to the right and to the left and glide up and down. And then that top fin, the dorsal fin, is what they use for balance. So it helps prevent them from rolling all the way over or spinning out in the water, right? Okay, moving back to that teeth. So in this image right here, you're actually seeing white shark teeth. So like I was saying earlier, with sharks, their teeth fall out and regrow throughout their entire lifespan. And different types of sharks have very different types of teeth. And they also change slightly as they age because they're getting bigger, right? So they're going to need bigger teeth, and they might be feeding on bigger prey as they get bigger. So, like I said, these teeth are white shark teeth, and they're triangular because let's think for a minute what a white shark eats. So if you've ever watched some of those documentaries, white sharks eat seals, right? Well, to get those seals, they have to make sure they attach that seal and can hold on to the seal to eat it, right? Because the seal is going to try to swim away. So they're triangular shaped so that it can grab the seal and hold on to it to eat their meal. Now, on the other hand, we'll talk about a little bit more later, whale sharks, the biggest type of shark, they have many tiny little teeth that they use to help strain plankton out of the water. So they eat this really tiny little animal called plankton, like you might have seen in SpongeBob SquarePants, and they eat that plankton, but they have to get it out of the water. So they move the water in through these little slits teeth, and it filters out the plankton, so then only water gets passed over their gills, and then they can eat that plankton. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit to shark habitats. So like I was saying, there's many hundreds of kinds of sharks. So where do these sharks live in our oceans? Can they live anywhere, or do they only live in specific areas? Well, as you see, I put on the slide, they can live from shallow to deep water and even from salt to fresh water. So just like humans on land, right, we live in many different areas of the world. There are people in Alaska who live in very cold areas all year round, and they've adapted to living in those areas. Same as some people, really fun fact, in Peru, the country Peru, they live in really high elevation, and their hearts have actually adapted to get more oxygen out of that higher elevation with less oxygen so that they can survive up in those high elevations. So sharks are similar. Sharks have different methods of adapting to different areas of the ocean. So one example is the Portuguese dogfish, which is this top picture, is actually the shark that lives the deepest in the ocean, but it's unfortunately been almost extinct due to hunting by humans. So sharks do live in many areas of the oceans, but they actually are not believed to live much deeper than 10,000 feet, which is an interesting fact. So they don't actually live in the deepest part of our oceans, but they can live pretty deep in our oceans. Now moving from the salt to freshwater, bull sharks are actually really interesting, which is the shark pictured in the bottom image, because they have the ability to actually swim up rivers. Now, don't get scared here. They can't swim in rivers all their lives. They just swim up rivers briefly, and they have this ability because they give birth to their young in estuaries. So what is an estuary? An estuary is like the mouth of a really large river. So it's where the river dumps water into the ocean. And in that area, you have fresh water meeting salt water, right? Well, bull sharks have adapted to being able to survive for a certain amount of time in fresh water so that in these areas they can raise their young in a safer environment to prevent their young from being eaten by other animals in the ocean. Okay? All right, so now moving on to shark sizes. Like I was saying earlier, sharks come in all shapes and sizes and have many different characteristics. So the smallest shark can actually fit in the palm of your hand when it's full grown. And that is called the dwarf lantern shark, pictured here in the top image, quite literally in the palm of someone's hand. And then the largest shark, like I mentioned earlier, is the whale shark. So remember how I said the whale shark ate? It's the largest shark, but it eats one of the smallest animals. It eats plankton. So it has those really tiny teeth, remember, that moves the water over the teeth to filter out the plankton so it can eat that plankton. And these whale sharks can actually grow up to 46 feet long. That's a lot of human lengths, huh? So think about this, shark sizes ranging from super small to super large. That's similar to humans too, right? We have very short humans and very, very tall humans that live in this world. Okay, now moving on to shark skin. So maybe you've heard the analogy of shark skin being compared to sandpaper, right? Sandpaper has that rough texture. Well, that's a true comparison. Shark skin has these little teeth on them you can see in the picture that are called dermal denticles. So that's an interesting characteristic. If you rub a shark the wrong way, it's actually kind of sharp, like sandpaper. Okay, now shark diets. What do sharks eat? Like we mentioned earlier, sharks can eat really small animals or they can eat really big animals in the ocean. It depends on the type of shark, right? So like we were saying earlier, white sharks eat sea lions or seals. So why might you hear all these scary stories about humans getting bit, especially while surfing? Well, look at the picture here I put in the slide. See how similar the human surfer looks to other animals in the ocean? That's why sometimes humans get mistaken for these animals, but sharks do not feed on us as part of their diet. We are not what they're looking for when they bite us in the ocean, and that happens very rarely. We as humans are actually a much bigger threat to sharks than they are to us, similar to many other animals in the wild. Can you think of any other animals you've heard of to not be super afraid of and to respect? I'm sure you thought of some. There are animals that are scary out in the wild, but that's their home, right? So when we're spending time in the ocean, that's that shark's home. So we have to respect that. And also remember that sharks are only trying to find an isolated source of prey. They're not going to attack if there's a lot of prey around, right? So it's best when you're in the ocean, if you're scared of sharks, just hang out with a large group of people and you really should have nothing to be afraid of. And also, I'll add, many shark bites actually happen by accident. And a lot of times the shark is curious as to what the heck we are because, once again, we're in their home. So, another example is sometimes surfers will be surfing in an area where there's a big school of fish. Well, sometimes your arm or your leg can get confused for a fish if you're just swimming with a ton of other animals that the shark likes to eat. And it's not their fault because we're in their home, remember. Okay, so moving on to another really cool aspect of sharks, their sight and smell. So, real quick, don't look at the words on the slide. Do you think sharks have eyelids? They do. We have eyelids too, right? What do our eyelids do? So, as humans, our eyelids protect our eyes, right? They also help keep them moist. So, first, let's just talk about the protection because that's really similar to what a shark's eyelid does. They put their eyelid, which is actually called a nictitating membrane, over their eyes during dangerous situations. So when they're eating their prey, they will close their eyelid to protect their eyes. But what happens when they close their eyelid? Well, just like with us, they can't see anymore when they close their eyelid. So what do they do then? Well, on the next slide, we'll talk about how they use other senses to find that prey when they get close to eating. Now, sharks are colorblind, right? This is kind of interesting. It's like dogs, what you hear a lot with dogs. So they actually can't see color, but they use many other senses to help find prey and navigate the oceans. So different sharks can actually smell in very different ways. Nurse sharks, actually, which is the picture shown on this slide, can smell how concentrated something is in the water and follow that to its source. So it can find a concentration and then navigate. So when it gets more and more concentrated, they know they're getting closer to where the source of that smell is. Now, bull sharks, like we talked about earlier, don't have quite as good of a sense of smell, and they have to use their vision a lot more to follow the current to find the source of that smell. So now think for a second about how many people, so let's think for a second about this myth that sharks, a lot of people say that sharks can smell a drop of blood from a mile away. Well, sharks cannot smell a drop of blood from a mile away. It's a myth that they can. So I want you to think about this. Think about how many people swim in the ocean with scrapes and cuts and all that kind of stuff and aren't really attacked, right? Well, humans aren't attacked because they're bleeding in the ocean. It's because we've maybe gone into an area where that shark was trying to do something else. So they aren't seeking us out. We are actually kind of encroaching on their area. So here are some sexual statistics on how likely you really are to get bit by a shark. So you're actually more likely to get struck by lightning, killed by hippos, killed by cows, than you are to be bit by a shark. And this one I think is really interesting. You're actually more likely to be bitten in New York City by a fellow human than you are to be bitten by a shark. That's pretty crazy. So like I said on a couple slides earlier, we are much more dangerous to sharks than they are to us. They do not have emotions like we do. They're not biting us on purpose. They're biting us because we get mistaken for their normal food, or they're curious as to what we are doing in their area. So I just want you to remember that, and don't be scared of sharks while in the ocean. If you're going to a beach with a lot of other people, like I said, you will be fine. Okay, so like I said, when they close those eyelids, when they get close to their prey, they can't see anymore. So how, then, do they find their prey? Well, they have this, what some people call an electric feel. What does this mean? Well, they have pores on their snouts. So if you see in this picture of this shark, all those little circles are pores. And they're called ampullae of Lorenzini, which is a really fancy word that just kind of means that they're able to sense muscular movements of prey or even beating hearts of an animal hidden in the sand. So they sense these electric fields in the ocean when they get close to their prey. So when they use their sight and other senses and get close enough to a prey, they can shut those eyelids and just use this electric field to get close to that prey and then eat their meal. So, fun fact. Can you think of any other animal in the animal kingdom that also has these electric feels or these pores? Now, you might not know this, but duck-billed platypuses actually also have these pores, which is really interesting. But when they use it in outside of water, it's not as good because electricity moves better in water. Okay? So now, one of the last few slides, I'm just going to share some pretty fun facts I found while looking into this. So I don't know if you knew this, but sharks can actually suntan. So this picture on this slide shows two baby hammerhead sharks. And the one on the left you can see is really dark, while the one on the right is much lighter in color. Well, the one on the left was in a shallower pool while it was growing up, so it got more sunlight and actually turned a darker color. Another fun fact is how sharks have really, really amazing immune systems. They're able to fight off many infections in the ocean and heal very quickly from bites and scratches. So when especially white sharks mate, they tend to bite and scratch each other during this and heal very quickly from these scratches without much problem. Another really cool fact, there is actually a 470-year-old shark. This is crazy. So it's really hard to figure out how old sharks are, but they've actually been able to measure in Greenland sharks a shark that was 470 years old. And they've estimated that these Greenland sharks can live anywhere between 252 years to 512 years old. How can they live this long? Well, these Greenland sharks, as it says in their name, live in very cold, deep water. So when you live in cold, deep water, you have a slow metabolism and everything kind of slows down. So they don't need as much energy to sustain life, right? So that's why they're able to live, or part of why they're able to live for so long. It'll be interesting to see, the more we learn about sharks, how old some other kinds of sharks might be. So another interesting fact, just like us and just like our dogs, sharks have body language. So they don't have emotion, but they do show what's going on with body language. So if they're agitated, like maybe you've seen a cat, you run into a cat in an alley and it kind of curls its back up and looks at you. Well, you entered its space, right? Well, sharks can kind of give those kind of same body languages to humans. So a lot of people who are around sharks in their life can understand these body languages and back off. So actually the researcher in this picture talks about, he has been researching baby hammerheads for a really long time, and him and his team have learned that there's certain characteristics that a hammerhead will show when it doesn't really want to be touched or handled. I mean, how often do you really like to be picked up or handled right now, right? And the last really cool fun fact I like is sharks can actually evert their stomach. So what does that mean? So let's first go to with humans. So with us, when something doesn't sit right or something's going on in our body and we want it, whatever it is, out of our stomach, our muscles move in the opposite direction they normally do to bring that food out of our stomach, and we vomit, right? Well, with sharks, they actually can take their stomach and push it out of their mouth to rinse it off. That's crazy, right? Well, what might be a reason they want to do this? So let's think about what sharks eat. They eat whole animals. They're not picking always the meat off the bones of fish, right? So they might want to get rid of those scales and little bones. So they can actually flush out spines and scales of fish by doing this method of bringing their stomach out of their mouth and rinsing it off in the water. Kind of crazy and a little gross, right? Okay, so like we said on the previous slide, how old Greenland sharks can live. This is a picture actually of a Greenland shark. Now this one we don't actually know how old it is, because the only way we're able to find out how old a shark or a Greenland shark is right now is when we have a dead shark body, unfortunately. And that's only found when fishermen accidentally catch sharks instead of the fish that they're going for. So you can kind of see the shark does look pretty old, doesn't he? Yeah, he's got a lot of little scrapes on him and shows aging. Okay, so what is this animal? Yeah, you might think killer whale or orca, right? Why am I showing it here in this presentation? Well, you might think of orcas as friendly animals and really interesting, right? They have very interesting social networks. They travel in groups and they have little families or pods, which is really cool. It's kind of like how us as humans function. While you might think sharks are scarier than orcas because you can relate to an orca more because of that family system. But actually, orcas are a predator over sharks. They actually hunt sharks sometimes. So orcas have been known to actually eat great white sharks because they can work in a group to take down a bigger animal. So that's actually really interesting, because you might think like, oh, sharks are the king of the ocean. But really that definition belongs a bit more to orcas. Okay, so if you liked any of this information I presented here, this is a website where I got a lot of this information from, and they actually show a lot of different live streams of sharks in their aquarium and many other sea life like otters and octopuses. So if you're interested in learning more about sharks or sea life in general, I very much recommend asking your parents if you can visit this website, because they have very cool videos and live streams you can watch throughout the day, and it's a lot of fun. I personally really enjoy watching the otters, and next week I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about otters. All right, so thank you so much for listening to this. I hope you enjoyed some of the information I shared, and here are a couple of the websites I used to find the information. Thank you guys so much.